So obviously, this is what we call, as an ecologist, we call this a case-selected life history, meaning that they really are not designed to withstand a lot of natural mortality. So as you can well imagine, a big white shark, there's not too many things out there in the ocean that's going to be causing natural mortality on a white shark. Maybe a killer whale could take one on, but they're just not designed to withstand much fishing pressure. And there were much natural mortality, and as a result, they can't really withstand much fishing pressure. So what we know about their reproduction, again, they mature late, so around 10 years plus. We think they have a reproductive cycle where females will produce a litter every 3 years. And the reason it's 3 years is because they think it takes them 2 years to gestate a litter. So they're pregnant for 2 years, which is quite a scary thought. The way they nourish their offspring is quite interesting. The female actually, during her pregnancy, never stops ovulating. She ovulates thousands and thousands of tiny little yolk-rich eggs. And the little baby white sharks swimming around in her uteri, or her uterus, they will actually just snack on these eggs the whole pregnancy. So they don't have an umbilical connection. A lot of sharks do have an umbilical connection like we do, but these lamniforms have a very different system. In fact, there are some lamniform sharks, not the white shark, where once the eggs stop coming, the embryos turn on one another and only one of them comes out alive. They cannibalize one another. It used to be thought that white sharks did this, but they do actually have litters of 10 to 12 pups. So clearly they don't eat one another in the litter during pregnancy. And what's really interesting is in all of scientific work on white sharks, scientists have only examined 3 pregnant females. So it's very, very unusual to get a pregnant female, probably because they're big, they're hard to get, and they're probably quite rare. One little interesting genetic note is we know that the female white shark will mate with a whole bunch of different males, because if you take a litter of white sharks like this, you can actually genetically show that there's more than one father for the litter. So that the females mate with multiple males. So this is a white shark embryo. So they're about 4 feet long when they come to term. So they're about 4 feet long when they're born. So that's a big fish already. They get these really big swollen bellies from eating all these eggs. What's really interesting is once they're born, they immediately lose weight, because there's nothing better than eating all these eggs. There's nothing better as far as nutritionally than you pack on a lot of weight like that. But once you've got to go out in the ocean, you've got to get it for yourself, guess what? You're going to lose a lot of weight. And that's exactly what they do. So a newborn white shark is about this big, and they're quite streamlined little things. They're quite cute. So this is an interesting picture. This was taken in 1964 off the certain beach in New Jersey. And this is the result of one 50-hook longline that was set right off the beach in New Jersey. This, to me, is staggering to think you could catch that many. There's actually, I think it's 10 juvenile white sharks. These ones here are all newborns. These ones are probably about 2 years old. They have a pretty fast growth rate. So it's staggering to me. I don't think anybody has ever duplicated anything like that anywhere in the world, to go out, set one long line and catch that many little white sharks. To me, as a geneticist, I really think I would have loved to have genetic samples of these, because to me this looks like that might be one litter and that might be one litter, and they might be hanging together in little schools after they're born. And some people think they do that, but of course there's no genetic material from these guys. So it's really funny, these guys set this long line because they wanted to figure out if there was any risk of shark attack in New Jersey. And they set that line, and they actually hushed it up because they thought people would freak out if they knew that sort of stuff was waiting on the Jersey shore. And of course, I think there's far more scary things on the Jersey shore nowadays. But in any case, I mean, we're really interested in what these things eat, right? Because we have this idea in our head that they eat us, which really isn't true. So what do they eat? Well, when they first come out, again, remember, this is this big. So a shark this big really isn't going to go after us. We're bigger than that shark. So the little ones, the juveniles, they're mainly eating benthic fish like sea robins. They're eating pelagic fish like menhaden. They're eating spiny dogfish, smooth dogfish, and skates. So they're very, very much eating fish. And if you look at a white shark, juvenile white shark's teeth, you'll actually notice that they're much narrower than the adults. The adults have that broad tooth shape like that. Their tooth is more like that. And that's really well adapted for grasping a slippery little fish and swallowing it whole. And that's exactly what they do. They just swim around and catch these guys and wipe them out. Once the white shark gets to around 10 feet, there is a massive change in its girth. So it gets to be a much bigger, girthier animal, and its teeth broaden out at the base, and they develop these very heavy serrations. And once they hit 10 feet and all the way up for the rest of their life, they are the apex predator out in the ocean, aside from killer whales. They're eating big fish like tuna. They're eating seals. They're eating dolphins and harbor porpoises. And so the adult white shark is absolutely an apex predator. This is what apex predator, the word, this is what it was designed for. So you might notice the white shark is eating a lot of things that nobody else eats. Like there's not, when you think about it, there's not many other animals that are tackling harbor porpoise, seals, things like that. And that makes the white shark ecologically very, very important, because in terms of predation, it's the only thing that's causing, it's the only thing predating on these things. So if there is top-down control, meaning top-to-bottom control of seals or harbor porpoises, it's this guy that's doing it. So if you take this guy out, who knows what will happen to the rest of the ecosystem. Depends how much top-down control there really is, but that's the role they play. So I mentioned that Mundus would go out and find whale carcasses. They are apex predators, but they're certainly not worried about scavenging. So this is a white shark feeding on a dead whale. So actually right off the coast of New York, in the early 80s, a team of researchers put an acoustic tag on a white shark that was feeding on a whale. And they tracked it for 3 days, followed it in a boat and tracked it, and they did all these things. They figured out they estimated its metabolic rate, and they suggested that a white shark can basically, if it fills its belly with whale meat, it can go for about 2.5 months without eating again. That's how much. That's how good a windfall these whale carcasses are. So where do they go? What do white sharks do in the ocean? The old view of a white shark was that they were very strongly coastal species, that they live very close to shore, they follow the shore, they stay on the continental shelf. The other big thing is that they like cold water, temperate water. So you wouldn't find one out in the tropics. You'd find them kind of at the latitudes we're at now. That's kind of their major area. So in the last few years, people have been attaching these things called satellite tags on white sharks. So I assisted putting a satellite tag on this guy in New Zealand. We hooked it, put a lasso around its tail, and then we leaned over the side of the boat. A satellite tag is simply a tag with an antenna on it, and every time the shark fin breaks the surface, that tag communicates with a satellite and gives a position as to where it is. So you can track them for quite a long time. So you put this thing in, we have corrosible bolts, put it on top of the fin. You can see the antenna sticking up right there. We muted the sound because there's an awful lot of swearing in this video. Because this shark, when it took the hook, it jumped clear out of the water immediately. And you might have seen on National Geographic channel, I'm not sure if you've seen this program, but they are taking white sharks and they pull them out with a boat lift. In New Zealand, we don't go for that. We just lean over the side of the boat and put the tag on. So this is, again, something I did in March of this year down in Stewart Island, which is the very bottom of New Zealand. Now, Stewart Island has a ton of white sharks. There's a lot of seals down there, so they hang out down there. So this guy, this white shark, we put the satellite tag on, and I can show you pretty much what it did. So it followed the coast of New Zealand, and it went out in the open ocean, and then it went up to Fiji. So much for hanging on the continental shelf and staying in temperate waters. Fiji is in the tropical Pacific. It went about 2,000 miles, and it's in Fiji now. So from March. So it didn't take it that long really to work its way all the way up to Fiji. So you might think, is that just an anomaly? Is that shark strange? Is it weird? Is it just something that only New Zealand sharks do? Well, off the coast of California, they've done a lot of satellite tagging of white sharks. They've probably satellite tagged 70 or 80 white sharks off California. And what they've discovered is that it used to be thought that here in Northern California, like the Farallon Islands, that's a big elephant seal colony. And the sharks would show up in the fall. And they noticed that down in the Baja, etc., they find juvenile white sharks. And the hypothesis is that these sharks made this kind of a migration, just up and down on the coast, like this. And that's what they did. So they're here in the fall, down here in the spring. They come back up, that sort of thing. They put satellite tags on it and found out just how wrong they were. The white sharks leave the Farallons in the spring. They come out in the middle of the Pacific. Some of them go as far as Hawaii and hang out in tropical waters out in the middle of the ocean. And then they turn right around and go back and hit the Farallon Islands or whatever the point in the coast they want to go to. They hit that again and so forth. So that's the 2,000-mile one-way migration that they do absolutely every year. And as it turns out, we call the white shark a coastal continental shelf species. In fact, this part of their life, this part takes up about 3/4 of the year. So it's more precise to think of them as a pelagic shark. So when we think of white sharks taking out seals and things, that's really just a fraction of what they're doing. We don't actually know what they're eating out here. I think they're eating squid, because when they're out there, as you'll see, they're doing some interesting things.